This week on By the Numbers, here on our free segment on YouTube, join us as we talk about the job market. Are Americans finding it harder to get a job and or keep it? For now, sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee, and join us as we take you through the numbers. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Lyndsay.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. Did you have a good weekend?
I had a busy weekend.
Yes.
It was very news heavy.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so we, we're doing things with the little one. We went to a petting zoo, but in between that, we're like, got to check the news, got to see what's happening, which of course is so silly because nothing was happening. It's just talking about it and speculating and nothing is going down.
Right. So let's jump into the headlines that we do have for today. We're starting with the job market again. Americans are suddenly finding it harder to land a job and keep it.
Yes.
So job seekers have been calling the shots for nearly 4 years as employers struggled to fill millions of openings to meet an onslaught of demand coming out of the pandemic. But this red-hot labor market is feeling a little bit more lukewarm for job seekers, according to this article.
Yes.
So my first question, just blatantly ask it, what is the current unemployment rate? Where do we stand today? Because we talk about the job market a lot.
We do.
But let's talk about current numbers.
Yes. And I'll admit, I've actually gotten away from talking about the unemployment rate recently. I think it's probably time to bring it back, to start talking about it again, because for so long I had been saying, man, it's really the number of unfilled jobs.
Yeah.
That's what's constraining business. It's not, I like to phrase it, it's not the workers that can't find jobs. It has been the jobs that can't find workers for several years now.
Right.
We're at an inflection point, and now maybe it is, again, some of the workers that can't find jobs. Net, we still do not have a one-to-one ratio of unemployed workers and unfilled jobs. So we're getting back to that balance. We're not there quite yet. I just do want to level set.
And what are we looking to that balance for? What does that mean if we get to that one-to-one?
Sure. Well, I guess there's nothing magic about it, right? We always do have some level of structural unemployment, right? There's some transition. I'm between jobs right now, or my skill set needs an update before I can find a good position. So to answer your first question, the unemployment rate today, the article quotes seasonally adjusted unemployment rate. That is 4.1%. Which is rising, yes. On a not seasonally adjusted basis, a little higher, 4.3%. We've been down in the 3% range for quite a while, but I want to compare that back to our 10-year average, which is 4.8%. We're still a lot in let's call it tighter balance. So still in an employee's market more than an employer's market compared to not recent history, but 10-year history.
Okay, so that 4.1% that's quoted in the article, that is the June number for unemployment.
Correct.
But you're referring to the 10-year average.
In comparison, yes. 4.1% is June, 10-year average is 4.8%.
Okay, so just to kind of put it into perspective, it's not really that off. For the last 10 years, it's been a really healthy job market.
It really has been relatively tight, right? Ever since 2008, the Great Recession, we saw the unemployment rate tick steadily down. We got a spike during 2020, right? Everyone got laid off or furloughed or whatever.
Right.
But that spike really corrected quickly. It was just a temporary dislocation. It was not a fundamentally driven change that lost all those jobs.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many data points that just kind of fell off the charts during that time
Exactly.
period. So that's the unemployment rate. Let's put it into a figure. How many Americans are currently unemployed?
Today, we have 7.2 million unemployed workers. That is up 8.6% on a 12/12 basis.
Okay.
So yes, to give the article some credit, there are more unemployed individuals today than there had been 1 year ago.
Okay, all right. So yeah, the article says how does that compare for a year-over-year level this time last year? At 3.6% unemployment and 6 million unemployed Americans.
Right.
As compared to the 4.1% unemployment rate and the 6.8 million. The article said 6.8.
They have slightly different measures, but same ballpark.
And is that because of that seasonally adjusted?
Very likely,
okay.
Yes.
All right. And all right, so let's talk about what's driving this spike in the unemployment rate.
Yeah.
The article says that it's driven primarily by more people entering into the workforce. That seems a little bit logical, but talk to us about that.
It does. And I found that really interesting because it certainly is a different driver. If we see business expanding, hiring more people, right? We actually do have private sector employment today. The number of employed workers is 136 million. That is up 1.7% on a 12-12 basis. So more people are working today. But the balance, right, of when we see the unemployment rate rising, the question is, well, is that because of job cuts, of job losses, or is it that we just have more workers both employed and unemployed?
Yeah.
So it seems to be that we're a little bit tipping into the latter description, at least as this article, really talks about it. But what's interesting to me from a longer term trend, this is not a general demographic shift that more people will be aging in. If anything, we will see in the next several years more folks aging out of the labor force, retiring.
Interesting.
The baby boomers, we
talk about it being such a big generation.
It is the big generation, and we've seen them behave a little bit differently than past generations. Again, life expectancy is longer today. Folks are working longer. That's the common kind of refrain.
Right.
But when that large generation eventually does, maybe they'll hang on longer, but when they eventually do exit stage left, the Gen Z, that's the new generation aging into the workforce right now, they're actually a lot smaller in numbers. So we don't have a balance here with coming in and leaving.
Yeah, and referring back to an article from either last week or the week before, we talked about the boomer generation being the wealthiest generation because they had those pensions and they are able to be retired and spending on that money right now. Do we think that potentially Gen Z will actually be hanging on longer, retiring later, if at all, because of the pensions being gone?
Potentially. Again, just because the pensions are gone, we've actually been saving in different ways, right? So more investing in, say, mutual funds, or even if you don't have a defined benefit pension, you're more likely today to have a defined contribution benefit. So, defined contribution pension. So there are different kind of vehicles. To say what Gen Z will be doing, I'll be gone by then, so I won't have to worry about it being a generation up. But we are seeing general expansion in life expectancies. So to say that people should be working longer, I don't mean it in a judgmental way, but just that we are living so much longer, we can be.
And then to go back to this, more people employed, more people are working right now than before. Is this just a little bit of a right sizing from what happened after the pandemic? I know that a lot of our clients would ask, I heard so many times just this straight up question, where are all the workers that were here before COVID? Where did they all go? And how are they surviving? Because the stimulus money cannot be enough to be living off of still.
Yes. So we're coming back down from that ultra tight job market where that was the question, where did they all go?
Right.
During the pandemic, we saw a lot of reskilling. So maybe someone who was, as we said, laid off or furloughed in one sector, they might have reskilled into something slightly different, pursue a different job. Many folks did see that stimulus money carry them through in a different way. They said, I am not living out my life passion. I'm going to go start my own business.
Yeah,
a lot of folks,
entrepreneurship.
Because they had that ability to, maybe that financial buffer hadn't existed previously. So today, again, we are at a higher level of employment today than we had been during the pandemic, or pre-pandemic, I should say. So it isn't that we are just still making up ground. We've surpassed those previous peaks. Today, employment is higher than it has been in history, partially due to population growth, right? We have more folks in the country, so more folks working. But you're right, it's a very common refrain still that, man, it doesn't feel like it did back then.
Right. Yeah, like where did everybody go? How's everybody still affording to live off? I had one client who had taken this deep dive into this barter culture where people during COVID, whether they got furloughed or decided to quit, have gone into this like simple lifestyle where they barter for things. And that people are sustaining full lifestyles on the barter system.
That's kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I have no research into it, but I remember a client like sharing that during a report review, and I thought, what an interesting little research study to look into.
Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna have to do more digging there.
Yeah. So a quote from the article, it says, "We went from how is this job market defying gravity to let's hope it doesn't hit the ground."
Yes.
So we talked about the unemployment rate and what's leading to that, but let's talk about our other favorite little metric here, the quit rate.
Yeah.
What are the driving factors to the quit rate? The article does say that it has held steady at just 2.2% for 7 months running after reaching 3% during the pandemic. So my question there kind of was, is that 3% in the quit rate what everybody was referring to as the Great Resignation?
Yes, that is it exactly. Back in 2022, by our measure, it was actually over 3%, that quit rate.
Okay.
And so that was, everything from I am going to take my stimulus check, start my own business, right? There was a lot of that. There was also a lot of just dislocation in I'm going to go across the street because I see a big sign on their window that says now hiring X dollars per hour, sign-on bonus, right? There was just so much, really
Lots of
visible competition for workers everywhere.
Yeah.
Yes. And so 2022 was the peak of kind of movement, right? 2021 was pretty elevated as well. The low in the quit rate this cycle was actually in late 2023. We hit 1.9%. Today, by my numbers, we're at 2.3%. The article said 2.2.
Yeah,
So very much in the same ballpark. What that means to me is that anytime that quit rate is coming down, that's either less confidence on the employee side, right? I'm not going to quit my job because, I don't know if I'll find something else or find something better. Or it's just a little bit less movement, right, from one job to another. I didn't find something else. I'm probably not quitting my job without something lined up unless I'm, really in extenuating circumstances.
Yeah.
So some of this might just be that kind of all of those moving pieces, right, have settled a little bit post-pandemic.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. This is good news for those long-awaited rate cuts, right? We want to see this wage inflation in this disinflationary time because that means that the rate hikes that the Fed was doing has done its job, and now inflation can start to cool. But if people were continuing at that pace before to do those job switches and getting those higher rates and employees were having to really kind of pay for the talent, that was a threat to reining in inflation, correct?
Yeah, here's the good news is bad news again. So this is bad news. It is a little bit tougher for employees, a little bit easier, a little looser conditions for employers looking to hire. But for the Federal Reserve, this is wage disinflation. That's what they've been looking for before they do those rate cuts. So I think this data keeps us very much on track for September rate cuts.
Okay, that's good news then. There we go. See, good news is bad news. Bad news is good news.
Exactly.
No PR is bad PR, right? They all go hand in hand. So there is this, pretty strong quote in here. It says people are still moving between jobs at a slightly faster rate than they were pre-pandemic, but the pay raises they're getting when they make those moves is a degree softer.
Yes.
That sort of suggests that the pendulum has swung slightly more in favor of the firms and away from the workers. And that was from Dave Tinsley, senior economist at Bank of America. So that seems to support that theory as well. And we can be all eyes on September, maybe November.
On September, yes.
So the article then takes a look at continuing claims for unemployment benefits, which is another metric of how to look at the unemployment rate in the unemployment sector.
Right.
So these are benefits that are filed by people who have received benefits for at least a week or more. And this rose to 1.85 million during the week that ended June 22nd, making it the highest level since November of 2021. So that doesn't seem good.
Well, again, good is bad, bad is good. So anytime we go back and compare to 2021 with, again, that frenzied market.
True.
Honestly, almost anyone who wanted a job could find a job in that environment. So to say that this is the comparison, yes, I agree. In the past 3 or 4 years, we are taking a step back. But compared to long-term averages, this is still a very healthy level. And if we compare, the article also cites the number of initial unemployment insurance claims.
Yes.
That was 11.36 million during the 12 months through June. That was essentially even with the year-ago level. And actually, the individual months of May and June were slightly improved from past May and past June.
Okay.
So it doesn't seem like there is a surge. This is not a wholesale change in the labor market. But to me, this is just a little bit more incremental evidence that the labor market is, as you said, kind of cooling back off from that red hot 2021, 2022 timeframe.
Right. It's just a kind of what goes up must come down, or what goes down must come up in this scenario.
Yes.
But let's talk about industry specifics.
Sure.
So what industries are driving kind of the most unemployment right now?
Yeah.
The article kind of talks about retail and manufacturing, but then it
Right.
also kind of has this big bucket of professional and business services, which it says includes accountants and people who work in marketing, saying that industry employed 17,000 fewer people last month compared to May.
Right. So a lot of the biggest gaps are starting to be filled. And those are things from our perspective, like manufacturing, like construction. That's where we saw, again, some reskilling taking individuals either up the skills chain or even out into a slightly different sector.
Yeah.
That was a real constraint from manufacturers. If you can't staff your line, you're not able to produce at full capacity.
Right.
Just when demand, right, as we've been talking about, was so elevated. For construction, we were hearing reports that projects were being delayed because they couldn't get a full crew on site. Yeah. So some of those gaps are where we see very notable pull in. Retail sales, that's a tough one. So much, going on kind of.
Lots of seasonality in that
one
one too,
seasonality,
right?
Yeah, a lot going on under the surface. But professional services, a little bit of cyclicality happening here. If you include things like the tech sector that very notably has been doing layoffs, then we see, again, a little more outright negativity versus others. This is kind of a slowdown and muddle through. Maybe companies aren't hiring as much. Like there are many fewer unfilled job openings that they have those postings for.
Yeah.
But we're not seeing severe belt tightening. We're not seeing severe cuts. Demand does still exist in those professional services industries. As we've been talking about so much, the service side of the economy is really resilient and hanging in there this cycle.
And that's really what this economy is. We talked about this in past episodes as well. We're more of a service-based economy right now as opposed to a manufacturing-based economy that we have been in the past.
Exactly.
Especially with this shift to AI and making things, we've kind of had to evolve that way as we've talked about with our clients. We talk a lot about capacity constraints and demand planning. That's a huge part of what we help our clients do every day. And there's that wild card of labor.
Yes.
That's something we can't solve for them necessarily.
It's so tough. And that's why we've been giving advice for years now that AI automation, that can help fill the gap for things like manufacturing, for those heavy lifting, repetitive, dangerous tasks. That still is a very good investment. I think we're starting to see a little bit more acceptance of that I don't need a human to be doing this task, right? I can automate it. So that will take down those number of unfilled job openings. Eventually, we're not there quite yet.
And that's all the time we have for today here on our free segment on YouTube. Remember to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to subscribe to full-length episodes, click on the link in the description below. Until next time, bye, Lauren.
Bye, Lyndsay.